his jaw. It wasn't that he had been careless, it was the power within him, growing beyond his control. Fueled by his emotions, by his desire to prove himself. In the end, the storm had consumed more than he had ever intended. The memory of villages torn apart, crops reduced to ash, and the cries of mortals caught in the chaos haunted him still. He took a step forward, shaking off the weight of his past. The path was clear, and there was no turning back. A voice, calm and distant as if it had echoed across centuries, interrupted his thoughts.
You stand at the gates of Anyanwu, but only those who are worthy may enter.
Amadioha turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as they fell upon a figure draped in robes of molten gold. The figure was ancient, his posture a study in dignity, as though he had seen the rise and fall of countless gods and empires. His face, shrouded beneath a sun-kissed hood, radiated a soft glow, as if he himself were a fragment of the light that blazed within the citadel.
And how does one become worthy?
Amadioha's voice was sharp, laced with impatience. His pride was wounded, and he was in no mood to plead for entry. The servant chuckled softly, the sound carrying with it the weight of countless trials witnessed.
To stand before the sun god, one must first prove they can withstand the light. Do you believe you are ready to face what burns even the most powerful of gods?
Amadioha's eyes darkened, a low rumble of thunder echoing in the far distance as though the heavens themselves responded to his will. His power, though still raw, was potent enough to make the skies tremble.
I am not afraid of light, I command the storms.
The servant's head tilted slightly, as if considering the weight of Amadioha's words. His hood shifted, and for the briefest moment, Amadioha thought he saw eyes of pure gold staring back at him, unreadable, ancient, eternal.
Storms are fleeting. They roar and rage, but the sun endures. The sun burns. The sun judges.
The servant finally said. Amadioha's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. He would not be cowed by cryptic words. His power, even unrefined, was formidable.
I seek neither fleeting glory nor judgment. I seek mastery.
Mastery over chaos. Is that not what led you here?
The servant's voice was soft but piercing.
The elders spoke of your storms as a force beyond control, a destruction that tore through lands meant to flourish under the gods' protection.
Amadioha stiffened at the accusation, his pride flaring.
My power may be untamed, but it is mine to command.
Is it, or does it command you?
The servant's voice lowered to a whisper. A flicker of doubt crossed Amadioha's mind, but he quickly banished it. He would not be questioned by a mere gatekeeper. Without another word, the gates of the citadel began to creak open, spilling forth a blinding wave of light. The heat that poured out was unlike anything Amadioha had felt before. It wasn't the warmth of a summer sun or the blaze of a simple flame, it was the core of creation, the essence of Anyanwu himself. As if the citadel itself was alive, breathing with the ancient, untouchable fire of the cosmos. Amadioha felt the light searing heat immediately, an intensity that threatened to consume him, to reduce him to ashes. His skin tingled and burned, and for the first time in a long while, he felt vulnerable. This was no mere test of will. This was a crucible. But he stood firm, every muscle in his body tensed against the unbearable pressure. His chest rose and fell with each labored breath, and beneath the pain, the storm within him stirred. The thunder inside him crackled, rising to meet the challenge, as if the very force of his being was waking up, eager to answer the light with fury.
Step lightly. The citadel of light is not kind to those who seek only power.
The servant warned, his voice barely audible over the roar of the light. Amadioha's lips curled into a defiant smile.
I don't seek power, I seek control.
The journey through the gates felt like an eternity. Every step was a battle against the radiant heat that threatened to tear him apart. His skin shimmered with sweat, and though the light blinded him, his vision flickered with flashes of lightning. Remnants of his inner storm. For a moment, he wondered if this was truly the path to mastery, or if the Pantheon had sent him here to break him. But he pushed forward, every step an act of defiance against the unbearable weight of the light. Finally, the searing brightness began to dim, and the overwhelming heat subsided, leaving behind a lingering hum of energy in the air. Amadioha found himself in the heart of the citadel, a vast chamber bathed in a softer glow. Golden flames flickered from massive braziers. The chamber was grand, otherworldly, pillars of radiant stone lined the hall, each etched with the stories of gods long forgotten. He could feel the weight of history here, as though the very air was heavy with the deeds of those who had come before him. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne made of pure light, sat Anyanwu, the sun god. His presence was overwhelming. Anyanwu didn't need to move or speak to command the room, his very existence did that. His form was imposing, his skin gleaming like molten gold, and his eyes, twin suns, regarded Amadioha with an intensity that pierced straight through him. There was no malice in his gaze, only the weight of judgment. As if Anyanwu could see not just the surface, but the very core of Amadioha's being.
You seek me, young one, but do you understand what it is you truly seek?
Anyanwu said, his voice deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Amadioha met his gaze, unflinching, though his heart pounded in his chest.
I seek mastery over my power. I seek the strength to control the storm within me.
Anyanwu leaned forward slightly, the light around him bending with the motion, as if the very essence of the citadel was an extension of his will.
Power is a burden, Amadioha, one that will consume you if you do not learn to bear it.
I have already borne the weight of thunder.
Amadioha's pride flared, but he forced himself to remain composed. Anyanwu's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than calm passed over his face, an emotion too subtle to name.
Thunder is nothing without the storm that sustains it. You are raw, unrefined. If you wish to learn, you must submit yourself to the light. You will be tested. You will be broken.
Amadioha's jaw tightened. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to reject the idea of being broken. But deep down, he knew this was what he needed.
I'm ready.
The sun god rose from his throne, his movement graceful yet carrying the weight of cosmic authority. The very walls of the citadel seemed to hum in response, as if they were alive, attuned to his will.
We shall see.
And with that, the first trial began.
Amadioha twisted violently, the radiant chamber of the citadel of light dissolving in an instant. His feet were swept from beneath him, and his entire being was pulled into the heart of an intense, burning void. His vision blurred, his body weightless, and caught in a gravity unlike anything he had ever known. Then, the reality of his situation struck him with full force. He was inside the core of the sun. The heat was oppressive, not just in its intensity, but in the way it wrapped around him like a living, breathing force. The very air was fire, and his skin blistered under the unrelenting pressure. The core of the sun swirled beneath him, an endless ocean of molten flames, pulling him deeper into its fiery depths. "You stand inside my heart," came Anyanwu's voice, distant but all-encompassing, as if the very fire itself was speaking to him. "To endure my power, you must survive the core of the sun. If you fail here, you will be consumed, and your thunder will be nothing but a whisper lost in the flames." Amadioha's breath caught in his throat. His chest tightened as he fought against the overwhelming heat. His skin burned with every moment, every breath he took filling his lungs with fire. His power, his thunder, felt small in the face of such immense heat. His storm crackled weakly at his fingertips, only to be swallowed whole by the sun's overwhelming force. But he would not yield. I command thunder, Amadioha growled through gritted teeth, his voice hoarse from the heat. I am not afraid of the sun. Laughter echoed through the flames, cold and mocking, despite the unbearable heat. You cannot command what you do not understand, Amadioha. Power without control is nothing but destruction, and what happens to a storm when it is overtaken by the light? Amadioha pushed forward, every step a battle against the molten fire around him. His body felt as though it was being pulled apart, torn between the crushing weight of the sun and the surge of the storm within him. He tried to summon his lightning, but the flames pushed back, burning away any semblance of control. His mind raced, the truth of his exile clawing at the edges of his consciousness. You were banished because you failed to control your power, Anyanwu's voice pressed on, as if reading his very thoughts. You let your pride and your rage dictate your actions. You let the storm consume you. And now, you face the consequences. The words struck deeper than Amadioha wanted to admit. He tried to block out the voice, but the memories surged forward, unbidden. The faces of the mortals flashed before his eyes, the villages destroyed, the fields set ablaze by his unchecked fury. It had been a mistake, but the damage had been done. The elders had seen him as a force of chaos, a god too dangerous to trust. Reckless, dangerous, unworthy. The words had echoed through the halls of the Pantheon. Do you remember their faces? Anyanwu's voice echoed through the flames. The mortals who trusted you, only to be swept away by the storm you unleashed. Amadioha's hands trembled, his mind clouded with the images of the destruction he had caused. Villages torn apart, homes reduced to rubble, lives lost. His power had consumed everything in its path, including his own judgment. The storm had been beyond his control, and in that moment, so had he. I will not fail again, Amadioha whispered, though even as the words left his lips, the flames seemed to close in, tightening like a noose. He could feel the heat gnawing at him, pulling him deeper into the heart of the sun, closer to annihilation. You do not yet understand. Anyanwu's voice boomed, growing louder as the flames closed in. You are not battling me. You are battling yourself. Your pride, your fear, your anger, these are the forces that threaten to destroy you. The sun only reveals what already lies within you. The truth cut through Amadioha's defenses like a blade. His pride, his rage, they had always been there, fueling his power, but also leading him astray. He had believed that his thunder could conquer anything, that brute strength was the answer. But now, inside the sun, his power felt insignificant, small in comparison to the endless inferno surrounding him. Amadioha fell to one knee, his body shaking as the heat grew more intense. His vision blurred as the flames danced around him, pressing against his skin, searing every inch of his body. His storm flickered, barely a whisper beneath the weight of the sun's fire. His pride, the same pride that had driven him to seek mastery over thunder, was now the very thing that was breaking him. I am stronger than this, he growled, his voice weak but defiant. I command the storm. I control my power. But the flames only flared higher, as if in response to his denial. You believe strength will save you. The voice echoed again, this time from within the fire itself. But strength without control is destruction. Look at yourself. You do not command the storm, it commands you. A figure began to form within the fire, taking shape as it stepped closer to Amadioha. Its body was made of pure light, glowing with the intensity of the sun itself. Its face was featureless, save for two burning eyes that blazed like twin suns. Who are you? Amadioha rasped, his throat dry, his body trembling under the weight of the heat. "I am the reflection of what you seek," the figure said, its voice calm but commanding. "You are raw, like the storm you command, untamed, dangerous. You are a god who does not understand his place in the world." Amadioha's fists clenched, the anger surging within him. "I know my place. I am the god of thunder. You are a storm without direction," the figure interrupted, stepping closer. "You do not understand your power. You do not control the thunder. It controls you." The words hit harder than Amadioha expected. He had always believed that power was enough, that strength would carry him through. But the storm, his storm, had been wild, uncontrollable. It had destroyed everything in its path, and now, inside the heart of the sun, he realized he had been wrong. Strength was not enough. Power without control was chaos. "You are afraid," the figure continued, its voice unyielding. "Afraid of what your power can do. Afraid of what you might become if you truly understood it. Until you face that fear, you will always be at the mercy of your own storm." Amadioha's knees buckled, the weight of the words and the heat bearing down on him. The storm inside him raged, wild and untamed, just as it had been before. But now he saw the truth. He had been trying to control it with force, with sheer will, but that wasn't enough. The storm was a part of him, but it wasn't all of him. He needed to understand it, not fight it. "I will not fail," Amadioha whispered, though his voice was weak, barely audible over the roar of the flames. "You will fail," the figure said, stepping back as the flames closed in around him, "unless you learn to master yourself." Amadioha closed his eyes, letting the fire wash over him. The heat was unbearable, the pain excruciating, but he did not fight it. He accepted it. He allowed the flames to consume him, to strip away his pride, his fear, his anger. He let the storm inside him rage, but this time, he did not try to control it. He let it be, a part of him, but not the whole of him. And then, something shifted. The flames around him began to dim, the heat pulling back ever so slightly. The storm inside him quieted, still there, still powerful, but no longer wild. "You are beginning to understand," the figure said, its voice distant now as it stepped away. "But this is only the beginning." The flames faded entirely, and Amadioha found himself back in the radiant halls of the Citadel of Light, his body trembling but intact. He gasped for air, his skin raw and scorched, but he had survived. Anyanwu stood before him, his eyes glowing with the same intensity as before. "Endurance is only the first step, Amadioha. There is much more for you to learn." Amadioha met his gaze, his chest heaving. "I will not fail." Anyanwu's expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. "We shall see." Amadioha stood in the radiant halls of the Citadel of Light, his body trembling from the ordeal he had just survived. His skin was raw, scorched from the heat of the sun's core, yet his spirit surged with a newfound strength. He had endured. He had faced the fire of the sun and emerged not broken but stronger, his storm quiet but more focused than it had ever been. Above him, Anyanwu watched in silence from his throne of light. The sun god's face remained unreadable, but deep within, he was unsettled. In all the countless eons that he had trained gods of every kind, each seeking to harness their power, few had survived the core of the sun. Fewer still had done so with the speed Amadioha had shown. Most gods took days, weeks, sometimes longer, to fully endure the core's heat. Some never emerged at all. Amadioha had done it in a single day. Any god who could withstand the heart of the sun this quickly was no ordinary being. There was something about Amadioha, something beyond his raw power and thunderous will. It was as if he were driven by a force greater than himself. Something ancient, something divine. Anyanwu's thoughts drifted to Chukwu, the supreme god and creator of all things. Could it be that Amadioha was favored? Was Chukwu guiding him in ways unseen, making his path easier to tread? The thought gnawed at Anyanwu. He had trained many gods before, but none with such potential. And yet, Amadioha was still young, proud, reckless, and far from mastering the deeper wisdom required to truly wield his power. If he knew the truth of his potential, his ego might swell beyond control. Anyanwu remained silent, choosing not to voice these suspicions. If Amadioha was indeed favored by Chukwu, then it would be better left unspoken. Fueling the thunder god's arrogance could undo everything they had begun. No, Anyanwu would continue pushing him, harder than before, to see just how far Amadioha could go. Rest, if you can. Anyanwu's voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and calm as ever. Your next trial will be unlike the others. Amadioha's breath came heavy, his chest still rising and falling from the intensity of the trial. But his eyes, sharp and defiant, met Anyanwu's. I do not need rest, he said, his voice laced with both pride and exhaustion. I am ready for whatever comes next. Anyanwu's eyes narrowed, though he showed no sign of surprise at Amadioha's words. You are eager, but eagerness can be dangerous. The path you walk is not one that rewards impatience. Amadioha took a step forward, his legs still shaky but resolute. I survived the sun, didn't I? What more is there? The sun god leaned forward ever so slightly, his eyes glowing with the intensity of stars. You survived, yes, but endurance is only one piece of mastery. The next test is not one of strength, but of perception. Amadioha frowned, the weight of Anyanwu's words unsettling him. Perception. Follow me, Anyanwu said, rising from his throne. His movement was graceful, the light around him bending and shifting, as if it were an extension of his very being. Amadioha hesitated for only a moment before falling and stepped behind him. The citadel of light seemed to expand as they walked, the golden halls stretching endlessly in all directions. Pillars of light towered above them, each one etched with symbols and stories of gods long forgotten. The walls themselves seemed to hum with power, alive with the energy of the sun. Anyanwu led Amadioha deeper into the citadel until they reached a massive set of doors, glowing with an otherworldly light. As they approached, the doors opened on their own, revealing a vast labyrinth of shimmering light beyond. This, Anyanwu said, gesturing toward the labyrinth, is the Labyrinth of Illusions. It is a place where nothing is as it seems. Here, you will face not your enemies, but yourself. Amadioha glanced at the labyrinth, its shimmering walls twisting and shifting like a living thing. His brow furrowed. What am I supposed to do? Find your way to the center, Anyanwu replied. But be warned, the path will not be clear. The labyrinth will show you things, visions of your past, illusions of your future. Some will be temptations, others will be fears. You must see through them all. Amadioha's jaw tightened. He had faced trials of endurance, of strength, of will. But this felt different. The idea of confronting illusions, of facing his own past, unsettled him in a way that the heat of the sun had not. What if I don't succeed? Amadioha asked, though he hated the doubt creeping into his voice. Anyanwu's gaze softened just for a moment. Then you will remain lost. Without another word, Amadioha stepped forward into the labyrinth. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air shifted. The walls of the labyrinth closed around him, shimmering and pulsing with an eerie light. The floor beneath his feet was solid, yet it seemed to ripple like water with every step he took. Shadows danced along the edges of his vision, and the air grew thick, heavy with a strange tension. Amadioha pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. At first, the labyrinth was quiet, almost serene. But as he ventured deeper, the illusions began to form. The first vision appeared suddenly. A village, its buildings familiar and its people even more so. It was one of the villages he had sworn to protect, one that had been destroyed in the storm he had unleashed. The sky above was dark, filled with angry clouds, and the winds howled as lightning tore through the air. Amadioha's breath caught in his throat. He remembered this place. He remembered the storm, the chaos, the destruction. He had tried to control it, tried to stop the storm from destroying everything. But it had been too late. The village had been reduced to rubble, the lives lost forever. The vision played out before him, vivid and real. The faces of the villagers, their cries for help, echoed in his ears. His heart pounded as guilt surged through him, the weight of his failure crashing down on him like a tidal wave. This is not real, he whispered to himself, clenching his fists. It's just an illusion. But even as he said the words, the vision remained. The storm raged, the village burned, and the fates stared at him, their eyes filled with accusation. A voice whispered from the storm. You shook his head, his body trembling. No, I didn't. I tried. The vision twisted, the faces of the villagers shifting, merging into one. A single figure standing in the center of the destruction. It was him, Amadioha. His reflection stared back at him, eyes burning with anger and guilt. You are near. The reflection, you are destruction. You. Amadioha's heart's chest tight with fear. The storm within him rumbled, the thunder threatening to burst free. But he forced himself to breathe, to focus. This is not real, he repeated, his voice stronger this time. I will not let this control me. The illusion wavered, the village flickering like a candle in the wind. Amadioha took a step forward, his mind clearing. The vision faded. The storm dissipating. There was nothing left but the walls of the labyrinth. He had survived the first illusion. But the trial was far from over. Outside the labyrinth, Anyanwu watched from afar, his gaze fixed on the shifting walls. He had seen many gods enter the labyrinth, some never to return. But Amadioha was different. The speed with which he had faced the illusions, the way he had confronted his own guilt and emerged stronger, it was remarkable. Anyanwu's thoughts drifted once more to Chukwu. Was this the supreme god's doing? Had Chukwu bestowed upon Amadioha a strength unlike any other? But Anyanwu said nothing. He would not give voice to these suspicions, not yet. Amadioha had much to learn, and arrogance was a poison that could still ruin him. Anyanwu would continue to push, to test, until Amadioha either rose to his full potential or crumbled under the weight of his own pride. The trial was only just beginning. was still heavy with the lingering energy of the labyrinth as Amadioha stepped out into the sunlit hall. His body was worn, but his spirit felt more determined than ever. He had faced his own demons, the illusions of his past, and come out stronger for it. Yet there was something unsettling about the silence that followed his victory. Anyanwu, who had been present throughout his previous trials, was nowhere to be seen. For a moment, Amadioha stood alone, his thoughts drifting between pride and confusion. Where was Anyanwu? Before he could ponder further, the ground beneath him trembled slightly. It was a gentle, rolling movement, almost like a heartbeat pulsing through the earth. Amadioha's eyes widened as the floor of the citadel began to shift, sprouting vines and roots that twisted and grew before his very eyes. The once sterile chamber of light transformed into a vibrant landscape, the air filling with the fresh scent of earth and blooming flowers. Amadioha instinctively took a step back, his hand twitching as if to summon the storm. But something about this presence was calming. And then she appeared. From the very heart of the earth, Allah, the goddess of the earth and morality, rose with an elegance that could only belong to a deity. Her skin, rich and dark like the soil itself, seemed to glow with an inner warmth. Her hair flowed like cascading vines, adorned with flowers of every color, and her eyes sparkled with a wisdom that spanned ages. The earth responded to her presence. Grass grew where she stepped, trees sprouted and swayed in the invisible wind, and animals appeared briefly before melting back into the landscape. Amadioha stood frozen, unsure whether to bow or speak first. Amadioha. Allah's voice was soft, yet filled with authority. The god of thunder who merely destroyed a village with a single tantrum. Amadioha blinked, caught off guard by her casual tone, and the faint teasing in her voice. Tantrum. It wasn't, he began, but Allah raised a single finger, silencing him with a smile. Oh, don't worry. We all have our moments. Even the earth sometimes shakes when I'm having a bad day. Her eyes gleamed with humor, but beneath it was something deeper. Though I must say, your storms tend to leave a bit more devastation. Amadioha frowned, but a faint chuckle escaped him despite his best efforts. I'm learning, he replied, though his voice held a hint of defensiveness. Learning is good, Allah said, stepping forward, and with each step, the grass grew taller and richer. But learning must come with balance. That's why I'm here. She gestured to the lush world that had bloomed around them. The earth doesn't thrive through destruction alone. It requires care, nurturing, and restraint. Thunder may bring rain, but too much, and it floods. Too little, and the land withers. Amadioha crossed his arms, trying to mask his curiosity. So, you're here to teach me to water plants. Allah's laugh was like the rustling of leaves, soft, but full of life. In a way, yes, but more importantly, I'm here to show you that power without balance is just chaos. Suddenly, the vibrant landscape shifted again. A part of the field near them began to dry and crack, the flowers wilting as the once lush greenery turned brown. It was a vivid representation of what could happen without care. Come, Allah said, motioning him to follow her deeper into the field. Your next trial is not about strength or endurance, it's about control. Amadioha followed, intrigued, but still on guard. The earth goddess seemed peaceful, but he knew better than to assume her trial would be easy. They stopped in a meadow filled with towering trees, their branches heavy with fruit. The air was thick with life, buzzing with energy. Summon your storm, Allah said, her voice gentle but firm. But only enough to water this land. Too much, and you'll destroy it. Too little, and the trees will wither. Amadioha furrowed his brow. This was different from anything Anyanwu had asked of him. The sun god's trials had been about endurance, about survival. But this was about balance. How much rain are we talking here? Amadioha asked, raising an eyebrow. Like a light drizzle or... Allah smiled, but there was a glint of warning in her eyes. That, my dear Amadioha, is for you to decide. The earth will respond to your command." Amadioha hesitated for a moment, but then raised his hand to the sky. The familiar crackle of thunder rumbled deep within him, and dark clouds began to form overhead. He felt the storm stir, its power growing as the wind picked up, but he could also feel the delicate balance of the earth beneath him, the way it pulsed with life. "Just enough," he muttered to himself, trying to focus. Just enough. The first droplets of rain began to fall, soft and gentle. The trees swayed with the breeze, their leaves drinking in the moisture. For a moment, Amadioha allowed himself a small smile. This isn't so bad. But then, something shifted. The storm surged, the clouds darkening as lightning crackled across the sky. The gentle rain quickly turned into a downpour, and before he could pull it back, the wind howled, tearing through the meadow. The trees groaned as the force of the storm battered them, their branches snapping under the pressure. "Whoa!" Amadioha threw his hands up, trying to rein the storm back, but it was too late. The earth beneath them began to flood, the once lush meadow now drowning in a torrent of rain and wind. Trees toppled over, their roots torn from the soil, and the vibrant flowers were crushed under the weight of the storm. Amadioha cursed under his breath, his heart pounding. He had lost control. Again. Allah watched, her face unreadable. When the storm finally subsided, leaving behind a drenched, ruined landscape, she stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Do you see now?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "Your power is great, Amadioha, but without balance, it will only bring destruction." Amadioha clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. "I was trying. It's not easy to control something like that." Allah nodded, her tone gentle. "I know it's not easy, but being a god is not about ease. It's about responsibility. Power alone isn't enough. You must learn to wield it with care. Otherwise, the very thing you wish to protect will be the first to fall." Amadioha's shoulders slumped, the weight of her words settling over him. He had always seen his power as something to conquer, to control. But now, as he looked at the devastation he had caused, he realized that his strength alone wasn't enough. He needed something more. He needed restraint. Allah placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "You're not the first to struggle with this," she said softly. "Even the greatest gods have had to learn that balance is the key to true mastery. You have the potential, Amadioha, but you must learn that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The earth around them slowly began to heal, the flowers pushing through the soil once more, though the damage to the trees remained. "Again," Allah said, stepping back. "This time, think of the life beneath you. Think of the balance." Amadioha took a deep breath, his heart steadying. He raised his hand once more, summoning the storm, but this time with more focus, more care. The rain fell gently, nourishing the earth without drowning it. Allah smiled, watching as the storm settled into harmony with the world around it. Much better. Outside the field, hidden in the golden light of the citadel, Anyanwu watched quietly. He had seen many gods falter at this stage, unable to grasp the delicate balance between power and control. But Amadioha, he was different. His failures did not break him, and his successes, though few, were hard-earned. Anyanwu's suspicions about Chukwu's favor lingered in his mind, but he kept them to himself. There was still much for Amadioha to learn, but for now, he was on the right path. Chapter 5. The Forge of War. Amadioha was still contemplating the delicate balance of power and restraint after Allah's trial, the lush greenery of the earth still fresh in his mind. But before he could reflect any further, the ground beneath him trembled, not the gentle, life-giving pulse of the earth he had felt earlier, but a deep, resonant rumble, as if the world itself was preparing for battle. The sky above darkened, not with storm clouds, but with a heavy metallic hue, like iron darkened by fire. The air grew thick with the scent of molten metal and sweat, as the sound of clanging steel echoed in the distance. Amadioha's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary trial. Suddenly, the ground split open with a deafening roar, and from it emerged a towering figure, draped in armor that glowed as though fresh from the forge. Sparks flew around him, dancing in the air like fireflies, and his massive hammer, glowing red-hot, sent tremors through the earth with every step. His eyes, sharp and gleaming like polished steel, met Amadioha's with an intensity that could shatter stone. Ogun, the god of iron, war, and discipline, had arrived. Amadioha instinctively took a step back, but quickly steadied himself, heard of Ogun's might, his precision in battle, but facing him was something else entirely. The sheer weight of Ogun's presence was overwhelming, like standing before an anvil waiting to be struck. Well, Ogun's voice rumbled like distant thunder, though calm and measured, if it isn't the god of thunder himself. Amadioha straightened, squaring his shoulders, determined not to show weakness. I've heard of you too, Ogun, the god of war, right? Ogun chuckled, a deep, almost menacing sound. War, yes, but more than that. I am the master of iron, of fire, and of discipline, things you could stand to learn. Amadioha's brow furrowed. Discipline, discipline. Ogun repeated, his eyes narrowing. You hit like a storm, wild and untamed. But strength without discipline is chaos. In war, a single misstep can mean defeat. Your storms may tear through villages, but let's see if you can survive when the battlefield fights back. Without another word, Ogun raised his hammer, slamming it into the ground. The earth beneath Amadioha's feet shifted violently, and he stumbled as the floor of the citadel transformed before his eyes. What had once been solid stone now became a vast, molten battlefield. Rivers of molten iron flowed beneath towering iron platforms, and the heat from the forge-like arena seared the air. This, Ogun said, gesturing to the battlefield, is where you will prove yourself, but not through brute force. Here, strategy will win the day. Amadioha's fists clenched. Strategy. He was used to overwhelming his opponents with sheer power. But Ogun's calm, calculating gaze told him that approach wouldn't work here. Draw your weapon, Ogun said, lifting his hammer with ease. Let's see what you're made of. Amadioha summoned the storm within him, his hands crackling with electricity. The familiar rush of power surged through his veins, and dark clouds began to gather overhead, swirling with lightning. He was ready. But Ogun did not move. He stood still, watching, waiting, as if daring Amadioha to strike first. Come on then, Amadioha called, his voice echoing across the battlefield. Let's get this started. Ogun's eyes gleamed, but he did not reply. Instead, he took a single step forward, his hammer dragging through the molten ground, sending sparks flying. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if every step had purpose. It unnerved Amadioha. With a roar, Amadioha launched himself forward, sending a bolt of lightning crashing toward Ogun. The storm raged behind him, wind howling as the sky darkened further. But Ogun didn't flinch. He swung his hammer with precision, deflecting the lightning as if it were nothing more than a passing breeze. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the ground, causing the molten rivers to bubble and churn. Is that all? Ogun asked, his voice calm despite the chaos. Your power is strong, but it's unfocused. You attack like a wild animal, without purpose. Amadioha snarled, his frustration mounting. He summoned more lightning, striking again and again. But Ogun deflected each attack with ease, his movements steady and controlled. "Do you think you can overwhelm me with force alone?" Ogun taunted, stepping closer. In war, brute strength is only part of the battle. It's strategy that wins. Amadioha's chest heaved, his mind racing. His usual approach wasn't working. Ogun was right. He had been fighting like a storm, wild and untamed, relying on sheer power to overwhelm his opponent. But Ogun was different. He didn't fight with brute strength alone. Every movement, every strike was calculated, precise. Amadioha gritted his teeth. "Think. You need to think." He took a step back, eyeing the shifting battlefield. The iron unpredictably, the molten rivers rising and falling like waves. The heat was intense, but it also offered an opportunity. Amadioha allowed the storm to recede, his mind focusing. He could feel the rhythm of the battlefield, the way the platforms shifted with each tremor of Ogun's hammer. If he could time his movements right, he might be able to turn the terrain to his advantage. Ogun raised his hammer again, swinging it in a wide arc. Amadioha dodged, leaping to a higher platform, just as the molten river surged below. The heat singed his skin, but he ignored it, his eyes fixed on Ogun's next move. "You're learning," Ogun said, his voice filled with approval. "But it takes more than running to win." Amadioha didn't reply. Instead, he focused on the timing of the platforms, watching the way they moved. When the moment was right, he struck, not with a wild surge of power, but with a single precise bolt of lightning aimed directly at Ogun's feet. The platform beneath Ogun exploded, sending molten iron surging upward. Ogun was forced to step back, his footing momentarily lost. Amadioha seized the opportunity, leaping from platform to platform, closing the distance between them. This time, he didn't attack head-on. He waited, watching for Ogun's next move. When Ogun raised his hammer again, Amadioha struck, not at Ogun, but at the molten river below. The lightning hit the iron, causing it to erupt in a fiery explosion that engulfed the platform. Ogun staggered, momentarily blinded by the explosion. Amadioha moved in, landing a solid blow with a concentrated bolt of thunder, sending Ogun crashing to his knees. The battlefield went still. For a moment, neither god moved. Amadioha stood, panting, his body still crackling with energy. Ogun remained on one knee, his hammer planted in the ground for support. The molten rivers bubbled quietly beneath them, the heat still rising in waves. Then, slowly, Ogun rose to his feet, brushing off the dust and sparks that clung to his armor. A low smile spread across his face, the first Amadioha had seen since the battle began. "Well done," Ogun said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "You fought with your mind, not just your power. That's what it means to be a warrior." Amadioha, still catching his breath, couldn't help but smile in return. It wasn't easy. "War never is," Ogun replied, his expression serious once more. "But you've taken the first step. Remember, Amadioha, true strength isn't just about overwhelming your enemy. It's about outthinking them, anticipating their moves, and striking with purpose. A warrior wins not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest." Amadioha nodded, his respect for Ogun growing with every word. He had learned more in this trial than in any other, about strategy, about precision, and about the true meaning of strength. As the battlefield began to fade, Ogun placed a hand on Amadioha's shoulder. "You're strong, Amadioha, but strength is only part of the journey. Discipline, focus, and control. These are the things that make a true god of war." With that, Ogun turned and disappeared into the molten ground, leaving Amadioha standing alone amidst the fading heat.
The forest was alive with secrets, the anticipation. Amadioha had come to expect the unexpected during these trials, but this one felt different. The trees seemed to whisper to one another, and as he approached the shimmering web before him, he could feel it. A trap woven not of strength or endurance, but of more elusive wisdom. A voice, sly and smooth, drifted through the air. "Caught in my web already, Thunder God?" Amadioha looked up to see Anansi, the trickster god, descending from the shadows of the trees. He was in his spider form at first, moving with unnerving grace along the web. But as he approached, his form shifted into that of a wiry, human-like figure, his eyes gleaming with intelligence and mischief. "Anansi," Amadioha said, his voice steady but wary. "I see you're the one behind this trial." Anansi smiled, his robes shifting colors as he balanced effortlessly on the strands of the web. "Oh yes, but brute force won't help you here, Amadioha. This trial is about something far more dangerous than strength, wisdom." Amadioha crossed his arms, unimpressed. "You think riddles and tricks will stop me?" Anansi chuckled, spinning a thread between his fingers. "Oh, you'll find that a sharp mind can be more powerful than any weapon. Let's see if you can think your way out of this one." Without warning, the web tightened around Amadioha, pulling him toward the center. He tried to break free, but the more he struggled, the tighter it became. Anansi grinned as he watched the Thunder God tense against the trap. "Each thread of this web," Anansi said, "is connected to a riddle. Solve the riddles, and the web will loosen. Pull the wrong one, and you'll find yourself even more tangled." Amadioha's brow furrowed. Riddles. He could feel the weight of the trial. This wasn't about physical power. He would have to think carefully. The first riddle echoed through the air, as if the very web itself whispered it to him. "I have cities but no houses. I have mountains but no trees. I have water but no fish. What am I?" Amadioha thought for a moment, the answer coming to him. A map. The web loosened slightly. Anansi clapped, clearly entertained. "Good, good, but let's see how you handle the next one." The second riddle followed. "The more you take, the more you leave behind. What am I?" Amadioha answered without hesitation. Footsteps. The web loosened further, but Anansi's grin only grew wider. "Well done, but let's raise the stakes, shall we?" Then came the third riddle, more cryptic and subtle. "It walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening. What is it?" Amadioha's mind raced, but he recognized the answer. A human. As a baby, it crawls on all 4s. As an adult, it walks on 2 legs, and in old age, it uses a cane. The web slackened even more, but Anansi's eyes glinted with something deeper now, a shift from simple amusement to a more profound game. As Amadioha prepared for the next challenge, Anansi's tone shifted, becoming more conversational. "You know, I've always had a fondness for the Ashanti people. You've heard of them, haven't you? The kingdom in Ghana? A place where stories and wisdom are as powerful as swords." Amadioha raised an eyebrow. "And what do you have to do with them?" Anansi grinned, clearly enjoying the attention. "Oh, I've had my fair share of affairs with the humans there. They call me their trickster, their storyteller. My tales have shaped their very culture, their identity. Through my stories, I taught them lessons, sometimes harsh, sometimes humorous, but always with a purpose." He spun another thread, his voice taking on a reflective tone. "In the Ashanti kingdom, I wove my way into their hearts and minds. My stories carried their traditions, passed down from generation to generation. The Ashanti learned the value of cunning over brute strength. They understood that the sharpest mind could overcome the mightiest warrior." Amadioha listened, intrigued despite himself. The Ashanti kingdom was known for its wealth of culture, its powerful warriors, and its wisdom. To think that Anansi, this playful, tricky god, had influenced them so deeply spoke to the power of stories and cleverness. Anansi seemed to read Amadioha's thoughts. "Power, Thunder God, isn't just about muscles and lightning. It's about shaping minds, controlling hearts. The Ashanti knew this well. Perhaps you could learn something from them. He leaned in, his smile wicked. And from me. As the web loosened around Amadioha, Anansi's tone changed once again. There was a seriousness in his voice that hadn't been there before. "You're powerful, Amadioha," Anansi said softly, "but you're not the only one. There's another god out there, one who wields thunder and lightning as you do. But his storms are different, wilder, more unpredictable." Amadioha's interest peaked. Another god of thunder? Anansi's gaze grew distant, as if recalling ancient memories. "He's fierce. His lightning strikes with fury, his storms come without warning, and he wields a double-headed axe called Ose. In some ways he's like you, but there's something deeper, more primal in his power." Amadioha's hands clenched at his sides. "Who is he?" Anansi grinned, but this time it was more mysterious. "Let's just say you'll meet him soon enough. When your paths cross, we'll see who commands the skies more powerfully, you or him." The comparison lingered in the air, unsettling Amadioha. Another god of thunder. He hadn't even considered the possibility. His mind raced with thoughts of this unnamed rival, wondering whether he was truly a match for him. Anansi watched Amadioha closely, his eyes gleaming. "But don't worry, Thunder God. You'll have plenty of time to prepare. After all, the wars to come will decide many things, including who the true ruler of the storms is." The forest around them shimmered, and the web began to shift again. As Amadioha prepared for what would come next, Anansi's tone became more serious. "You've solved my riddles, Amadioha, but I have a different kind of question for you now, one that even your thunder can't answer." Amadioha frowned, unsure of where this was leading. Anansi leaned closer, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Tell me, Thunder God, what do you know of the creator gods?" Amadioha raised an eyebrow. "The creator gods?" Anansi nodded, his voice softening. "Yes, the creator gods. Across Africa, in every kingdom, they speak of different gods who are said to have shaped the world and breathed life into humans. In the Ashanti kingdom, they speak of Nyame, the sky god, as the creator. In other lands, they speak of Olodumare, Mawulisa, Modimo, gods who are said to have created all things." Anansi began to weave another thread between his fingers, his tone growing more intense. "These gods are known in all these kingdoms to be the creators of the world and humans. But you and I both know something, don't we?" Amadioha stared at him, unsure of what Anansi was getting at. "There is only one world," Anansi said softly, "one world where humans live." "So, who is the true creator? Are these gods all the same? Or is there one among them who is the original creator of this world?" Amadioha's expression darkened. He had met Chukwu, the supreme god, the one who had created him. And yet, here was Anansi, questioning the very nature of creation. Anansi leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You are a god loved by Chukwu, aren't you? The last time you saw him, you felt his power, didn't you? The sheer force of it. Like standing before a force that could shatter the universe. You couldn't even look at him properly, could you? And that was him tuning his power down just to accommodate you." Amadioha's heart quickened. He remembered it all too well. The overwhelming presence of Chukwu, the way the very air had trembled in his presence, as if reality itself struggled to contain his power. Anansi's eyes glinted with curiosity. "So tell me, Amadioha, do you think there is another like him? Do you think these other creator gods are all him? Or is there something else at play here?" Amadioha felt the weight of the question settle over him. His mind raced, grappling with the idea that had been planted by Anansi's words. He opened his mouth to answer, the words forming on his tongue, ready to shatter the very fabric of what he had understood about creation. "I know that," Amadioha began, but the moment the words left his lips, a powerful force clamped down on him. His mouth was sealed, as if the universe itself had stopped him from speaking. The air around him seemed to ripple, reality bending under the weight of the truth he had almost spoken. Anansi's eyes widened for a brief moment, his smile faltering before erupting into laughter. He laughed so hard that he doubled over, clutching his sides, his voice echoing through the forest. "Now I see why you're popular among the gods," Anansi wheezed between fits of laughter. "You almost spoke something that could have broken the very foundations of our world. No wonder they fear your power." Amadioha, still silenced by the force of the truth he had almost revealed, glared at Anansi. But there was no anger in the trickster's eyes, only amusement and a strange sense of awe. Anansi wiped a tear from his eye, still chuckling. "Oh, Amadioha, you're full of surprises. It's no wonder the gods keep such a close watch on you. They know what you're capable of, but now I see it for myself." With his laughter dying down, Anansi returned to his web, spinning a final thread between his fingers. "But we're not quite finished yet, Thunder God. You still have one more challenge." Before Amadioha, the web shimmered and shifted once again, revealing the final puzzle, a complex, tangled mess of threads, each one representing the riddles and choices he had faced so far. The web pulsed with life, a reflection of everything he had learned during the trial. Anansi's voice was softer now, almost respectful. "This is your last test. One wrong move, and the web will trap you forever. But get it right, and you'll be free." Amadioha studied the web, his mind still reeling from the question Anansi had posed. But he couldn't dwell on that now. He had to focus. With a deep breath, he reached for the thread that felt right, the one that connected everything. He pulled gently, and for a moment, the web shimmered as if resisting him. Then, slowly, it began to unravel, the threads falling away one by one. Anansi watched, nodding approvingly. "Well done, Thunder God. You've proven that you're more than just a storm." As the web dissolved around them, Anansi gave Amadioha one final thoughtful look. "You've done well, Amadioha. But remember this, wisdom is a weapon too. In the wars to come, you'll need cunning, patience, and even trickery. Not all battles are won with brute force." Amadioha nodded, still processing everything that had transpired. He could feel the weight of Anansi's words, and the strange sensation of his mouth being sealed. How close he had come to speaking something dangerous, something that could have unraveled the very fabric of their world. Anansi, ever the trickster, sensed his unease and leaned in with a gleam in his eyes. "And about those creator gods, I wouldn't dwell on it too much. Let the others believe what they want. But you, Amadioha, you stand on the precipice of something much greater. Your journey is just beginning, and the truth you almost spoke today? It's not something the world is ready to hear." Amadioha's mind flashed back to the moment he'd seen Chukwu, the supreme god. The overwhelming power, the feeling of insignificance before such a force. The memory still weighed heavily on him, as did Anansi's lingering question. Were the creator gods spoken of in each African kingdom all different aspects of Chukwu? Or was there something even more unfathomable at play? As if reading his thoughts, Anansi waved a hand dismissively. "But enough of that for now. Let's talk about what really matters, the wars to come. You've been preparing, haven't you? The gods are watching, the mortals are moving, and soon the storm you carry will have to clash with forces even you may not be ready for." Amadioha's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Anansi's grin widened. "I'm talking about the other gods. You're not the only one with power, Thunder God, and sooner or later you'll cross paths with them. Thunder doesn't only crackle in your skies. There's another out there who wields lightning with a fury that rivals yours." Amadioha's heart quickened as he recalled the earlier mention of a rival god. "You keep mentioning him. Who is he?" Anansi smirked, his voice dripping with mystery. "Ah, wouldn't you like to know? His name isn't important right now, but trust me, you'll know him when you see him. His lightning is wild, untamed, and when the two of you meet, the very skies will shatter. But who will reign supreme? Who truly commands the storms? Anansi's laughter echoed through the forest, though this time it felt less mocking and more like a knowing amusement. He spun one final thread between his fingers, watching it disappear into the wind. I'd place my bets carefully if I were you. The world is full of gods who think they're untouchable, only to learn the hard way that power comes with consequences. The air around them stilled, and Amadioha could feel the weight of the unspoken wars to come. Anansi's words lingered, leaving him with more questions than answers. Who was this other god of thunder? Could their powers truly be on par with one another? And what of the creator gods? Was Anansi right in his musings, or was the truth far more complicated than even he knew? Amadioha clenched his fists, feeling the familiar surge of power coursing through him. He had always relied on his strength, his thunder, to carry him through battles. But now, with Anansi's warnings echoing in his mind, he began to understand that brute force alone wouldn't be enough, not in the conflicts that lay ahead. "I'll be ready," Amadioha said, more to himself than to Anansi. The trickster god raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. We'll see. You've got potential, Amadioha, more than most. But potential is just that, potential. What you choose to do with it, well, that's where the real fun begins." As the last threads of the web dissolved into the air, Anansi stepped back, his form beginning to blur into the shadows of the trees. But before he fully disappeared, he gave Amadioha one final piercing look. "You've been fun to toy with, Thunder God. But remember, I'm not the only one weaving webs. The world is full of unseen forces, and not all of them are as playful as I am. There are gods out there who won't stop at riddles. They'll tear you apart if they get the chance. So stay sharp, Amadioha. The next time we meet, it might be in the middle of one of those wars I keep hinting at." Amadioha watched as Anansi's form vanished entirely, his voice lingering in the air like a faint whisper. "Good luck, Thunder God. You'll need it." For a moment the forest was silent. The web was gone, the illusions had faded, and Amadioha stood alone. But in that solitude, the weight of Anansi's words pressed down on him. The wars to come, the rival god of thunder, the mysteries of the creator gods, these were no longer distant thoughts. They were looming realities. He took a deep breath, knowing that his journey was far from over, and whatever lay ahead, he would need more than just his thunder to face it. The atmosphere in the ancient temple was heavy, almost oppressive, as Amadioha stepped forward, his gaze moving across the inscriptions that adorned the stone walls. Unlike previous encounters, where the gods he faced carried themselves with an air of challenge or amusement, this was different. The air crackled with an intensity that set Amadioha on edge. Then there was movement. Orunmila appeared, his robes shimmering as if woven from the very fabric of fate itself. His face was calm, but carried a weight that none of the other gods had shown. His presence filled the temple, commanding respect without the need for any display of power. "Amadioha," Orunmila began, his voice deep and serious. "You've endured the trials thus far, the heat of the sun, the illusions of Anansi, the challenges of Ogun, but none of them compare to what lies ahead." Amadioha frowned, his arms crossing over his chest defensively. "You speak as if my previous training was pointless." Orunmila's expression remained unchanged, his gaze sharp. "I wouldn't say pointless. Each experience has served its purpose, but it's not enough. Surviving the core of the sun was impressive, but the true test is yet to come. Anyanwu was right to push you physically, and Anansi, for all his jesting, should have trained you more thoroughly in resisting manipulation of the mind." "Manipulation?" Amadioha scoffed. I handled Anansi's tricks. Orunmila tilted his head, the slightest hint of disappointment in his eyes. You survived, yes, but you were still ensnared in his illusions. You see, Amadioha, there's a reason why the other gods dance around you, behaving as if they are jesters before a king. Amadioha raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. Jesters? What do you mean? The truth is, Orunmila said, stepping closer, they fear you. All of them, except for Anyanwu, who perhaps sees something different in you. The rest, they fear what you could become. That is why they prance around you like clowns, keeping you occupied with petty trials, amusing themselves while never truly preparing you for what is to come. Amadioha's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. Fear me? But why? Because they see a power within you, Orunmila answered, his gaze never wavering. Something even they cannot fully understand or control. Something beyond the ordinary realms of divinity. Amadioha swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar unease settle in his chest. And you? Do you fear me as well? Orunmila allowed a small smile, but it lacked warmth. Fear? No, I am not here to entertain fear or arrogance. I am here to prepare you for the future, for what lies ahead. If you wish to survive, you must be ready to face something far beyond what you have faced thus far. Strength, cunning, endurance, these are all tools, but they are not enough. There was a moment of silence before Amadioha finally spoke, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Then what is enough? Orunmila's expression softened slightly, and he placed a hand on Amadioha's shoulder, a gesture not of power, but of gravity. We are about to find out, my young friend. This is only the beginning. Orunmila paced slowly across the temple floor, his gaze never leaving Amadioha. The air around them grew still, the gravity of the conversation pulling everything else into silence. Orunmila finally stopped, turning back to Amadioha, his eyes reflecting centuries of wisdom. You stand at the crossroads of fate, Amadioha, Orunmila began, his voice echoing softly against the temple walls. It's not just about gods and power. It's about the lives you affect, the worlds you touch, and the paths that are changed because of your choices. Amadioha frowned. You're speaking in riddles, Orunmila. What are you trying to say? Orunmila smiled faintly. I am speaking of the Yoruba people, those who worship us, those whose destinies are intertwined with ours. Have you ever thought of what their future holds? Amadioha shook his head. Their future? I am concerned with the trials at hand, not what mortals may or may not do. Then you misunderstand your role, Orunmila replied, his voice growing more intense. The Yoruba people will one day face a great change, a shift unlike anything you or I have seen. There will come a time when missionaries from distant lands will arrive, bringing with them the gods of another world. They will speak of salvation and conversion, and many Yoruba will abandon the ways of their ancestors for this foreign god. Amadioha's brow furrowed in confusion. Missionaries? Foreign gods? What are you talking about? Orunmila sighed, looking out beyond the temple walls as if seeing a future far beyond the present moment. A future where the gods of these lands are forgotten, replaced by beliefs that do not belong to this soil. A time will come when Yoruba culture will shift, and our presence will become stories told by elders to children who no longer truly believe. He paused, glancing at Amadioha, whose face was a mask of uncertainty. It won't just be the Yoruba, my friend. The Igbo people, your people, will face a similar fate. They too will be swayed by foreign promises, forgetting the power of Chukwu and their connection to their own gods. Amadioha clenched his fists, a surge of frustration welling up within him. And what of this future? Can it not be changed? Orunmila shook his head. Some events are inevitable, Amadioha. Fate is a river that flows regardless of our wishes. You may divert it, slow it, but it will always find its course. The coming of missionaries and the turning away from the old gods is something I have foreseen, and it will come to pass. Amadioha's frustration was evident in his expression. If this future cannot be changed, then why speak of it? Because within this change lies both tragedy and opportunity, Orunmila answered. The Yoruba people, though they may turn away from their traditional gods, will gain something else. They will become seekers of knowledge, driven by the desire for education, for progress. It is through this education that they will find strength in the new world. Amadioha raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Education? How does this fit into the ways of the gods? Orunmila smiled, a distant glint in his eyes. The pursuit of knowledge is one of the purest forms of divinity, Amadioha. The Yoruba people will rise in their pursuit of knowledge, and through this they will influence not just themselves, but the world around them. They will bring forth leaders, thinkers, visionaries, all driven by the thirst for wisdom. Amadioha looked thoughtful, absorbing Orunmila's words. So they will abandon us, but in doing so, they will find a new strength? Precisely, Orunmila said, nodding. Not everything lost is without gain. The balance of things, the shifting of powers and beliefs, it is all part of the grand design. Amadioha's eyes narrowed, his voice carrying a hint of defiance. But where does that leave us? The gods who were forgotten. What is our place in this future? Orunmila's gaze softened. Our place is not just in the prayers of mortals, Amadioha. Our place is in the balance of fate. Whether they remember our names or not, we are bound to this world. We are part of its fabric. And whether we like it or not, our roles will be defined not by worship, but by the actions we take when the time comes. Amadioha took a step closer, his eyes searching Orunmila's face. And what of the Igbo people? Will they face the same path as the Yoruba? Orunmila nodded solemnly. They too will face a time of change, of forgetting, but they will also rise in other ways. The spirit of the Igbo people is fierce, unyielding. They will endure even as they turn their gaze elsewhere. Their resilience will be tested, but they will not be broken. There was a silence between them, the weight of Orunmila's words pressing heavily on Amadioha. The god of thunder looked down, his thoughts racing. The future seemed uncertain, filled with loss and transformation that he could neither control nor fully comprehend. Orunmila placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes filled with understanding. It's not easy to accept, I know, but remember, Amadioha, fate is not always kind, nor is it always cruel. It is simply what it is, and it is our role as gods to see it through. Amadioha swallowed, nodding slowly. Then tell me, Orunmila, what is my role in this future? What am I meant to do? Orunmila's smile returned, though it carried the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. That, my friend, is something only fate itself can reveal in time. But know this, you are important to what is coming, more than you realize. The atmosphere in the temple felt different now, charged with something beyond the divine. Something ancient, almost unknowable. Orunmila began to pace again, his steps echoing across the stone floor as Amadioha followed his movements with his eyes. There was something heavy in the air, as if the very essence of the place was shifting in response to what was about to be revealed. Orunmila stopped, turning to face Amadioha, his expression unreadable. Tell me, Amadioha, Orunmila began, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, what do you know about fate? Amadioha frowned, slightly taken aback by the question. Fate? It's what happens to mortals. It's the path they walk, determined by forces beyond them. Orunmila's lips curled in a knowing smile. Typical of gods, so quick to reduce fate to something that only affects humans. Many of our kind believe the same. They think fate is a human condition, something beneath us, bound only to mortals who look up to us for guidance. Amadioha tilted his head, intrigued. And it isn't? Orunmila shook his head, his eyes filled with a deeper understanding. Fate is far more than that. Fate is a force, one that is as ancient as the oldest gods, one that binds even those who think themselves above it. Fate is not something to be wielded or controlled. It is something that shapes all, from the simplest human to the most powerful deity. Amadioha remained silent, his gaze fixed on Orunmila. The Yoruba people call me the god of fate and divination, Orunmila continued, his tone almost introspective. They see me as the one who controls the threads of destiny, who knows the paths that lie ahead. But it would be arrogant of me to claim that title, to truly think myself above fate. He sighed, a heaviness in his voice. I too am bound by fate. I see its patterns, yes, but I cannot change them. I am its messenger, not its master. It's a burden and a privilege to glimpse into the future, to see what lies ahead, knowing that even I cannot alter what is to come. Amadioha's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step forward. So, all these futures you see, they are unchangeable? Some are set in stone, Orunmila replied, his gaze meeting Amadioha's, while others are fluid, shifting with the choices we make. That's the irony of fate. It's both fixed and flexible. Knowing it is like holding a double-edged sword. It gives one insight, but it also bears a heavy burden. To see the future, Amadioha, is to carry a weight that few can endure. Amadioha frowned, considering his words. And what of me? Do I have a destiny, Orunmila? Am I also bound by fate? Orunmila's eyes seemed to shimmer, and he smiled. You are a god loved by fate, Amadioha. Have you never wondered why the other gods fear you, even if they do not show it outright? Amadioha raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. Fear me? Anansi spoke of it, but I still don't understand why. Orunmila nodded. They fear what they do not understand, and you are something beyond their comprehension. You see, fate has chosen you for something greater, and that terrifies them, because even they do not know what that means. You are not just a god, Amadioha. You are something more. More? Amadioha echoed, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Orunmila said, stepping closer, his voice growing more intense. You are the bridge between good and evil, between creation and destruction. Though you do not yet know it, there is a power within you, one that rivals the greatest forces in existence. You are not just a god of thunder. You are something much more profound. Amadioha took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. And what is this power you speak of? It is a power that comes into play when the balance of the universe is threatened, Orunmila said. It is a power that manifests when the creative force, the very source of all things, detects a shift in the balance of existence. It is a power that rivals both the greatest good and the greatest evil. Amadioha swallowed, his voice uncertain. And why are you telling me this? Orunmila smiled, a glint of both sympathy and resolve in his eyes. Because in your training, I will teach you to borrow a mere fraction of this power. A fraction so small it is almost insignificant. 0.001% of it. Yet even that fraction could change the fate of worlds. Amadioha's eyes widened, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was being told. Before he could speak, Orunmila raised a hand, stopping him. But that is for later. For now you must understand that this power is both a gift and a curse. It will come with challenges beyond anything you have faced before, and when the time comes you will have to decide how to wield it. Amadioha remained silent, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The implications of Orunmila's words were staggering. He was more than just a god of thunder. He was a force, a bridge, something destined to play a role in maintaining the balance of existence. Orunmila stepped back, his gaze softening. The balance of things must be maintained, Amadioha. When the universe falls out of balance, beings like you are activated. You are the bridge between yin and yang. Amadioha's voice trembled as he spoke. Beings like me. Am I not a god? Orunmila smiled, shaking his head gently. "You are more than a god, my friend. You are a bridge between good and evil, a force that exists to maintain equilibrium. Within you lies a power that rivals both the great good and the great bad. Of course, this power only activates when the creative force, the originator of all things, detects a shift in the balance of reality." Amadioha's gaze hardened, determination flashing in his eyes. "And why am I chosen for this?" "Because fate deems it so," Orunmila replied. "And because, whether you like it or not, you are the only hope in the war to come." Amadioha took a deep breath, his mind buzzing with questions and fears. The weight of his destiny had never felt so heavy. The temple grew darker as the conversation took a more somber turn. Orunmila's eyes seemed to take on a deeper, almost sorrowful glint as he looked at Amadioha. There was a stillness in the air, a sense of something left unsaid, waiting to be spoken. "There is something else you must know," Orunmila said, his voice quieter now, almost as if he was reluctant to continue. "A story that began long ago, a tale of arrogance and consequences, a story about a child who should not have existed." Amadioha furrowed his brow, intrigued but wary. "What child? What are you talking about?" Orunmila turned his gaze away from Amadioha, looking toward the carved walls of the temple as though they held memories of the past. A demigod, born of a human mother and a god-father, an abomination, or so the gods believed. Amadioha's eyes widened, his curiosity deepening. "A demigod? I thought the union between gods and mortals was forbidden." "It is," Orunmila replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "The child was born many years ago to an Edo woman in what is now a part of modern Nigeria. The mother was a mere human, and the father a god, one who believed love could transcend the boundaries of divinity and mortality." Orunmila paused, and Amadioha could sense the weight of what was coming next. "The other gods," Orunmila continued, "they could not tolerate such an abomination. The thought of a human wielding the power of a god terrified them. They could not imagine a world where such a being existed, so they decided to eradicate the threat before it could grow." Amadioha felt a chill run through him. "They killed them!" Orunmila nodded solemnly. "Both of them. The mother and the father. The gods acted out of fear, believing they were protecting the balance of the world. But in their arrogance, they failed to see the consequences of their actions. The child survived, though he was left abandoned, alone, with no knowledge of his origins, no understanding of what he truly is." Amadioha clenched his fists, anger bubbling within him. "They killed the parents, but left the child. Why?" "The gods believed the child was powerless," Orunmila said, shaking his head. "They believed that without the guidance of his parents, he would grow up as an ordinary mortal, never knowing his true heritage. They thought they had removed the threat, but they were wrong." Orunmila's gaze turned back to Amadioha, his expression intense. "This child, though he has not yet manifested his power, is destined to become the greatest threat the gods have ever faced. He has grown up without understanding who he is, without knowing the truth of his parents' fate, but that will soon change." Amadioha's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "How?" "A tempter will come," Orunmila said, his voice almost a whisper. "Someone who sees the potential in the boy, someone who wishes to steal that power for themselves. This tempter will lead the child to manifest his abilities, pushing him to unlock the divine power within him, but their plan will backfire." Amadioha tilted his head, curiosity mixed with concern. "Backfire?" Orunmila nodded. "The tempter will reveal to the child his true origins, what happened to his parents, how the gods saw him as an abomination. The child will be filled with rage, with a desire for vengeance against those who wronged him. He will become something the gods cannot control, something that threatens the very balance they sought to protect. Amadioha remained silent for a moment, the weight of Orunmila's words settling over him. "And what does this have to do with me?" Orunmila's eyes softened, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Because, Amadioha, when the time comes, you will have to face this child. You will be the one who stands between him and the destruction of everything we hold dear. This child's fate is intertwined with yours, and it is up to you to ensure that his power does not lead to the downfall of all that exists." Amadioha looked down, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and determination. "And the tempter? Who is he?" Orunmila shook his head. "That I do not know. Fate has kept that hidden from even me. But I know this. When the time comes, you must be ready. The balance of the universe depends on it." There was a long silence between them, the gravity of the situation settling over both gods like a heavy fog. Amadioha clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He had faced trials before, but this was different. This was not just about his power, his strength. This was about the fate of the world, about righting the wrongs of the past. "And what of the child now?" Amadioha finally asked. "Where is he?" Orunmila turned away, his eyes gazing into the distance as if searching for something beyond sight. "He is out there, somewhere, unaware of the storm brewing around him. But it won't be long now. The tempter will find him, and when that happens, the world will change forever." Amadioha nodded, the fire of determination blazing in his eyes. "Then I will be ready." Orunmila smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "I hope so, Amadioha, because when the time comes, it will not just be about power. It will be about balance, about ensuring that the rage of one does not destroy the many." The air in the temple shifted again as Orunmila turned his focus back to Amadioha. There was a stillness between them, a sense of quiet before the storm. Orunmila's eyes were unreadable, his expression carrying both the weight of ancient wisdom and the intensity of what was to come. "I've spoken enough of others for now, Amadioha," Orunmila began, his voice breaking the silence. "It's time to turn our attention back to you. Before we begin your training, there is something you must understand." Amadioha tilted his head, curious. "What is it?" Orunmila walked closer, his eyes meeting Amadioha's with a gaze that seemed to pierce through to his very soul. "Tell me, Amadioha, what do you know of duality?" Amadioha frowned, thinking for a moment before answering. "Duality. It is the idea that everything has an opposite. Light and dark, good and evil, strength and weakness. It's the balance of forces that makes the world what it is." Orunmila nodded, pleased. "A good answer. But there is more to it. Duality is the essence of balance, the existence of opposites, each defined by the other. It is what keeps the world in harmony, what ensures that creation is maintained and destruction is held at bay." He paused, allowing Amadioha to absorb his words before continuing. "Consider the world around you. There are two genders, male and female. There is good and bad, hot and cold, happiness and sadness. To appreciate good, one must have experienced bad. To feel cold, one must have known heat. This is the nature of the world, each thing defined by its opposite." Amadioha nodded slowly, his mind processing the concepts. "So everything has an opposite to maintain balance?" "Yes," Orunmila replied, his voice filled with conviction. "This duality is what keeps the universe in equilibrium. Without it, all would fall into chaos. And that is why you must understand its significance. The Igbo people see Chukwu as all good, just as the people of Israel see Yahweh as all good, and the Yoruba see Olodumare in the same light. But the truth is, all these gods of great good must have a duality, a counterpart that represents the opposing force." Amadioha frowned, his curiosity piqued. You mean a counterpart like a devil? Orunmila smiled, nodding. Precisely. Have you ever wondered why the so-called tempter, the devil, never dies, despite the power these gods possess to eliminate them? It is because they are both playing an intricate role that holds the balance of the omniverse, or reality as you know it. The great good cannot exist without the great bad. They must be in sync, like yin and yang. Amadioha's eyes widened as he considered Orunmila's words. The balance between good and evil, the necessity of both forces. It was a concept that resonated deeply within him, challenging everything he thought he knew about power and divinity. Orunmila stepped closer, his gaze intense. But what happens when one of these forces falls out of balance? When the great good becomes too dominant, or when the great bad threatens to tip the scales? Amadioha took a deep breath, unsure of what Orunmila was leading to. What happens then? That is when the universe activates its secret weapons, Orunmila said, his voice filled with purpose. That is when beings like you are brought forth. When balance falters, those like you, Amadioha, are called upon to restore it. Amadioha's heart pounded in his chest, his voice trembling as he spoke. Beings like me? Am I not a god? Orunmila's smile was filled with something akin to pride, his voice softening. You are more than a god, Amadioha. You are a bridge between good and evil, between creation and destruction. Though you do not yet fully know it, there is a power within you that rivals both the great good and the great bad. It is a power that only awakens when the creative force, the source of all things, detects an imbalance. Amadioha's gaze hardened, determination flickering in his eyes. And what is this power? Orunmila nodded, satisfied by Amadioha's curiosity. This power is beyond anything you have experienced, a force that can shape reality itself. But it is not something that can be easily wielded. It is volatile, dangerous, both a gift and a curse, and that is why I am here. He paused, his voice lowering to almost a whisper. In your training, I will teach you how to borrow a mere fraction of this power. Even that tiny fraction is enough to alter the course of fate, enough to challenge the very forces that threaten the balance of all existence. Amadioha's breath caught in his throat, his mind reeling at the enormity of Orunmila's words. A power so immense that even a minuscule fraction could alter the fate of worlds. He could feel both fear and excitement coursing through him, the realization of what lay ahead settling heavily in his chest. Orunmila's gaze softened, his eyes filled with understanding. This power is not something to be taken lightly, Amadioha. It requires not just strength, but wisdom, discipline, and a deep understanding of the balance that holds our world together. And that is why your training must begin now. Amadioha nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Orunmila's with a mixture of determination and resolve. I am ready. Orunmila smiled, his eyes carrying a glint of both hope and trepidation. I truly hope so, Amadioha, for the balance of everything we know, of reality itself, rests upon your shoulders. He stepped back, raising his hands toward the sky. Let us begin. But before Orunmila could say anything more, the ground beneath them began to tremble, a low rumble resonating through the temple walls. Amadioha's eyes widened, his body tensing as he looked to Orunmila for an explanation. Orunmila's expression remained calm, though there was an intensity in his eyes that spoke of the gravity of what was about to come. This is only the beginning, Amadioha. The balance is already shifting. Your training will determine whether you are truly ready for what lies ahead. And with those words, the temple seemed to blur, the world around them changing, shifting, and molding itself into something new, something more dangerous, more real. The world seemed to shift around them, the ancient temple blurring and transforming into something more ethereal, a place that existed beyond the constraints of time and space. Amadioha looked at Orunmila, his eyes reflecting both curiosity and uncertainty. There was something about Orunmila's presence now that felt different, as though he was about to share a truth that transcended even the gods. Amadioha spoke first, breaking the silence. Earlier, you mentioned the creative force, the source of all things. Shouldn't that be Chukwu, or Yahweh, or Olodumare, or any of the many creative gods out there? Orunmila's lips curled into a faint smile, one that carried both wisdom and secrecy. You already know what all these gods have in common, don't you, Amadioha? You almost said it to Anansi, and almost shattered reality with that truth, but here we are safe, protected by the walls of the sacred, and I will tell you. Amadioha's gaze narrowed, curiosity burning in his eyes. Tell me, Orunmila. Orunmila took a deep breath, his eyes locking with Amadioha's. Every living and non-living thing is made up of something we call the God substance. It is what binds the universe together, the essence that forms everything, from the smallest stone to the mightiest god. But tell me, Amadioha, why are we gods and humans are not? What makes a human and a god a god? Amadioha frowned, considering the question. Is it power? The ability to command and shape reality? Orunmila nodded thoughtfully. In part, yes. But there is more to it. There is an ongoing debate among the Council of Gods, gods like myself who serve fate and destiny, about this very question. Are all living things made up of the same God substance, or do some beings possess more of it than others? Amadioha's brow furrowed, his mind racing with possibilities. You mean, we're gods because we have more of this God substance than humans do? That is one theory, Orunmila replied, his voice calm. A theory that says we gods are born with a greater concentration of God substance, making us inherently superior. But there is another theory, one that claims that everything is made up of the same amount of God substance. The difference is not in the amount, but in awakening. Amadioha's eyes widened slightly, his interest piqued. Awakening? Orunmila nodded, a spark of excitement in his eyes. Yes, the theory suggests that we gods are born awakened, our God substance fully realized from the moment of our creation. Humans, on the other hand, humans are born in a state where they are unaware of their potential, believing themselves to be lesser, bound by the limitations of their mortal world. But the truth is, there have been humans who have transcended into the realm of the gods. Amadioha's eyes narrowed, a hint of skepticism in his expression. Humans ascend to the realm of gods? Orunmila smiled. Yes. Have you not heard the story of Buddha? A human who awakened his God substance and transcended his mortality, becoming something greater. He is but one example, but there are others, humans who have bent reality, who have shaped their lives, and even touched the divine. Amadioha looked thoughtful, his mind processing this revelation. So, the second theory, it makes more sense to you? Yes, it does, Orunmila replied, his tone more serious now. Humans are born into a world where they are made to believe that they are lesser, that they are separate from the divine. Most gods do not understand what it means to be human. We are born with power. It is handed to us, a gift from fate. But humans, they must earn their power. They must awaken, and that is what makes them so special. He paused, his gaze softening. The greatest gift humans possess is their mind. If a human learns to bend their mind, to see beyond the illusion of limitation, then they can bend reality itself and shape their destiny. That is the key to awakening their God substance. Amadioha looked at Orunmila, a newfound respect in his eyes. So, what is the true nature of the creative force? Orunmila's expression turned distant, as if he was peering into something far beyond the present. There is a tale as old as the oldest gods that says we are all part of a single being, a force that we call the creative force, the source. This power, so raw, so intelligent, and so immense, desired to experience all things, and so it duplicated itself, breaking into multiple pieces. The first of these pieces are what we today call the creative gods, like Chukwu, Olodumare, Yahweh. They are the closest in nature to the source itself. You might even call them the avatars of the source. They are it, and it is them, but not fully. They are less powerful because they are merely parts of the original whole. Amadioha listened intently, the weight of the information sinking in. So the source used them to create everything else? Yes, Orunmila continued. The creative gods became channels for the source, giving birth to everything we see. The gods, humans, the earth, the heavens. Every living and non-living thing is a fragment of the source, a part of its desire to experience all that is possible. Amadioha's eyes narrowed in thought. So, does that mean the source is in all of us? Orunmila smiled, nodding. Yes, the source is truly omnipresent. It is not just everywhere. It is everything. It permeates every part of existence, from the biggest gods to the smallest grain of sand. It is in the air humans breathe, the light of the sun, the depths of the ocean. It is truly omnipresent. Amadioha's voice was filled with awe as he spoke. But if that is true, then what of hell? The place they call Gehenna, or whatever name it bears, the place that lacks the presence of the divine. Orunmila's gaze grew intense. If that were true, then the creator gods themselves are not truly omnipresent. But the source is different. It is not just present everywhere, it is everything. Even the concept of a place without it is an illusion. The source is in all places, in all things. Amadioha's expression turned thoughtful, his mind filled with questions. But then, why are the creative gods so different in their personalities? Orunmila chuckled softly. Each of the creative gods has been assigned to different cultures. They take on the personality of the culture they are meant to shape and nurture. They are reflections of the beliefs and values of their people. That is why the creative gods differ, because they reflect the diverse expressions of humanity and the source's desire to experience all things. He paused, his eyes softening. That is also why forces like love are so powerful, because the source seeks love among all things. It seeks connection, compassion. And that is why, for a human or even a god to ascend in power, they must embody love and compassion. That is the true path to being close to the source. Amadioha nodded, his eyes filled with newfound understanding. Orunmila leaned closer, his voice lowering. But remember this, Amadioha. If any of these truths were to be spoken beyond these walls, it would shatter the fabric of reality. Amadioha's thoughts grew heavy, and he found himself pondering the origin of it all. How did the source come to be? Was fate involved? And if fate was involved, just how ancient was fate? He looked at Orunmila, who seemed to sense his question, but instead of answering, Orunmila simply smiled, a knowing, enigmatic smile that left Amadioha both curious and unsettled. The world around them had changed again, as if the temple had dissolved into the very fabric of existence. Now, Amadioha found himself standing beside Orunmila at the edge of a vast, shimmering lake. The water was unlike anything Amadioha had ever seen, dark yet glowing, with an aura that seemed to reach deep into the past, as though it carried the essence of the beginning of time. Orunmila gestured toward the lake, his voice calm yet filled with significance. This is no ordinary water, Amadioha. This is the raw water, the primordial element that existed before the separation of the heavens and the earth. It is older than the creative gods themselves, a force untouched by the divisions that shape our world today. Amadioha's gaze remained fixed on the lake, the gravity of Orunmila's words settling in his chest. The water from before creation, he murmured, almost to himself. Orunmila nodded, his expression serious. Yes, this water holds the essence of the creative force, the raw potential from which all things were born. And it is in this water that you must meditate. You must connect with the God force within you, but it will not be easy. The path to awakening this force is fraught with trials that will test not just your power, but your mind, your spirit. Amadioha turned to face Orunmila, his eyes filled with determination. Tell me what I must do. Orunmila's eyes reflected both sympathy and resolve. You must enter the water, and you must remain there in meditation for 40 nights. During this time you will confront the depths of your own being. You will face the shadows of your past, your fears, and the truths you have long avoided. Amadioha took a step closer to the water, the surface reflecting his image in an almost ethereal glow. And what will I gain from this? You will gain the ability to connect with the raw God force within you, Orunmila replied. This force lies deep within, but accessing it requires a clear and stable mind. The creative force cannot be harnessed by a mind clouded by doubts or fears. During these 40 nights, you will learn to silence the noise within you, to find the stillness that allows the divine to flow through you. Amadioha took a deep breath, the reality of what he was about to do settling in. The water seemed to call to him, a deep, almost cosmic resonance that promised both challenge and transformation. Without hesitation, he began to wade into the lake, the cool water sending shivers through his body as it rose higher around him. Orunmila watched from the shore, his gaze filled with both admiration and caution. This will not be easy, Amadioha. You will be tested, your fears, your regrets, the memories that haunt you. All will come to the surface. But know that I am here. I will guide you through this, even when it seems unbearable. Amadioha nodded, determination blazing in his eyes. I am ready. He moved further into the water, submerging himself until only his head remained above the surface. Orunmila raised his hands, his voice resonating with an ancient power as he began to chant. The waters around Amadioha seemed to come alive, swirling and shifting as though they were responding to Orunmila's words. Amadioha closed his eyes, allowing himself to sink beneath the surface. The world above disappeared, replaced by the quiet, almost eerie stillness of the raw water. He could feel the weight of the water pressing down on him, a sensation that seemed to reach beyond the physical, into his very soul. The first night was the hardest. The memories came like a flood, images of his past, of battles fought, of victories and losses, of moments that defined him for better or for worse. He saw flashes of his arrogance, the times when his power had made him careless, when he had thought himself untouchable. He saw the faces of those he had hurt, intentionally or unintentionally, and felt their pain as if it were his own. He struggled against it, the instinct to fight back rising within him. But Orunmila's words echoed in his mind. You must find stillness. He forced himself to breathe, to let the memories wash over him without resistance. Slowly, the chaos within began to settle, replaced by a quiet acceptance of what had been. The days blurred into nights, and the nights into days. He lost track of time, the 40 nights becoming an endless cycle of introspection and struggle. There were moments of terror, of darkness so deep he thought he would be lost forever. He saw visions of the child abandoned by the gods, the face of the boy twisted in anger and pain, his eyes filled with a hatred that seemed to pierce through Amadioha's very being. But then there were moments of light, brief flashes of clarity, where he felt the presence of the creative force within him, a power so vast, so limitless, that it took his breath away. He understood then what Orunmila had meant. The source was not something external, something to be found. It was within him, a part of his very essence. By the 40th night, something had changed. The chaos within him had given way to a deep, unshakable calm. He felt as though he had touched something beyond himself, something that connected him to everything, the gods, the humans, the world itself. He could feel the raw god force within him, a power that was both terrifying and beautiful, a power that could shape reality if wielded with wisdom. Slowly, Amadioha rose from the water, his body glowing faintly with the energy of the raw water. Orunmila stood waiting for him on the shore, his expression filled with pride and relief. "You did well, Amadioha," Orunmila said, his voice carrying a warmth that Amadioha had not heard before. "You have found the stillness within you, the key to unlocking the divine." Amadioha nodded, his gaze steady. "I understand now. The power was never something to be sought. It was always there, waiting for me to be ready." Orunmila smiled, placing a hand on Amadioha's shoulder. "Exactly. And now, with this foundation, we will move on to the next phase of your training. You have learned to connect with the divine force. Now you must learn to manifest it." Amadioha's eyes blazed with determination. "I am ready." Orunmila nodded, his gaze filled with both hope and caution. "Let us begin." The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the temple grounds as Orunmila and Amadioha stood facing each other. There was a new aura about Amadioha, one that spoke of the trials he had endured and the power he had touched. His gaze was calm, focused, as he waited for Orunmila's next instructions. Orunmila smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting both pride and anticipation. "You have taken an important step, Amadioha. You have found the stillness within you, the foundation that will allow you to access the creative force. But there is more to learn, more that you must understand if you are to truly manifest the divine power within you." Amadioha nodded, his expression serious. "Tell me, Orunmila." Orunmila gestured for him to sit, and both gods lowered themselves to the ground, sitting cross-legged opposite each other. Orunmila studied Amadioha for a moment before speaking. "Do you remember the time with Anansi?" Orunmila began, his voice calm. "Do you remember when you almost spoke the truth, the answer that would have shattered the fabric of reality?" Amadioha nodded, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Yes, my mouth was sealed, as if some force had prevented me from speaking." Orunmila nodded in agreement. "And do you know why that happened?" Amadioha shook his head. "No, I do not understand why my voice was taken." Orunmila smiled, leaning forward slightly. "The mouth is the gateway of creation, Amadioha. It is said that the creator gods spoke the world into existence, that their words shaped reality. This is not a myth, it is truth. Every being, whether human or god, possesses this power, but few understand how to use it." He paused, his gaze intense. "The power of manifestation lies not just in the strength of your body or the force of your will. It lies in the ability to believe with such conviction that the universe itself bends to your will. The reason your mouth was sealed is because the words you were about to speak held the power to reshape reality. The universe was not ready for such a truth." Amadioha's eyes widened slightly, realization dawning on him. "So, to manifest, one must believe without doubt." "Exactly," Orunmila said, nodding. "To manifest and bend reality, you must first believe it with every part of your being, without the slightest doubt. Humans often struggle with this. They do not believe they can command a mountain to move, and so they cannot. They are bound by their limitations, their doubts. But you, Amadioha, you are a god. You command lightning and thunder because upon your creation you were the god of thunder. There was no doubt within you, and so you summoned the greatest storm." Amadioha looked thoughtful, his gaze shifting to the horizon. "But it's different for humans. They don't believe they can do such things, so they don't even try. And even when they do try, there is always doubt, isn't there?" Orunmila nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Yes. Doubt is the greatest barrier to manifestation. It is the reason why most beings, even gods, cannot fully access their potential. You too are not immune to this, Amadioha. Though you are strong and powerful, there are things you believe you cannot do. Amadioha raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. What do you mean? Orunmila smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. For example, you rely on your thunder and lightning as your power. But have you ever considered other abilities? Have you ever tried to move an object with your mind, to use telekinesis? Amadioha looked surprised, shaking his head. Telekinesis is not my power. I have never thought of it. That, Orunmila said, his voice gentle but firm, is the limitation you have placed on yourself. You believe that because you are the god of thunder, your powers are confined to lightning alone. But the truth is, your potential is limitless. The power of the source is within you, and that means you can manifest anything, if you believe it. Amadioha looked at Orunmila, the weight of his words sinking in. So what must I do? Orunmila smiled. You must train your mind to believe without limits, without doubts. That is the purpose of your training here. The meditation in the raw water was to open your mind, to help you connect with the divine. Now you must learn to manifest. He stood, motioning for Amadioha to rise as well. We will train for what will feel like a year in the mortal world. You will learn to focus your mind, to remove all doubt and to command reality itself. You will learn to manifest power beyond what you believed possible. Amadioha nodded, determination blazing in his eyes. I am ready. And so began Amadioha's next phase of training, learning to manifest the power of the creative force. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Orunmila guided Amadioha through exercises that pushed his mind to the limits, challenging him to move objects with his thoughts, to reshape elements, to bend reality itself. At first, there were failures, many of them. Objects would budge slightly, only to fall still. Flames would flicker, but not ignite. Doubts lingered in Amadioha's mind, the voice of disbelief whispering that these were not his powers. But Orunmila was patient, guiding him through each failure, each doubt. The power is within you, he would say. You must believe, Amadioha, without hesitation, without fear. Only then can you manifest. Slowly things began to change. One day Amadioha raised his hand, and a stone floated into the air, defying gravity. Another day, he summoned a flame with nothing but his thoughts, watching as it danced across his palm. And as his training continued, Amadioha began to feel a shift within him, a deep, unshakable connection to the source. Then came the day when Orunmila decided it was time to access a fraction of the creative power. It was a power so vast, so raw, that even a tiny fragment could change the course of existence. You have learned well, Amadioha, Orunmila said, his eyes filled with both pride and caution. Now you will borrow a fraction of the creative power. It is enough to alter the balance of worlds. But you must control it, mask it, for its presence can erase gods from existence. Amadioha took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he focused inward. He could feel the power deep within him, like a blazing sun waiting to be tapped. Slowly, he allowed himself to access it, a tiny, almost insignificant fraction. The world around him seemed to shift, the air vibrating with an intensity that made the ground tremble. The heavens shook and the earth trembled, a deep rumble echoing through the underworld itself. Amadioha felt the power surging through him, the sheer force of it almost overwhelming. But he held on, his mind focused, his will unbreakable. He could feel the weight of the power, the danger of it, and he understood why Orunmila had warned him to be careful. The pressure was immense, so much that it could erase gods from existence. Slowly, Amadioha began to tone it down, to pull the power back within himself, masking it until he felt like nothing more than an ordinary mortal. The trembling stopped, the world returning to its normal state. Orunmila nodded, his eyes filled with approval. "Well done, Amadioha. You have learned to access and control the power within you, and more importantly, you have learned to mask it. The power you possess is immense, but it must be wielded with wisdom and restraint." Amadioha nodded, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. He had felt the power, touched it, and understood both its potential and its danger. Orunmila smiled, placing a hand on Amadioha's shoulder. "But this is only the beginning. There is much to come, and you will not face it alone. You will need allies, Amadioha. You must gather those who will stand with you when the time comes, for the balance of everything we know is at stake." Amadioha looked at Orunmila, determination blazing in his eyes. "I will gather them. I will be ready." Orunmila nodded, his gaze filled with hope. "Good. Because when the time comes, the fate of gods, humans, and all of existence will depend on what you do next." The temple walls shimmered as Orunmila stood before Amadioha, his voice steady and calm. "You've come far in your training, but what's to come requires more than strength alone. You'll need allies, gods who can stand with you in the battle that is approaching." Amadioha stood silently, his eyes focused, knowing the gravity of what Orunmila was about to reveal. "You must seek out these gods, and each will play a role in the wars to come," Orunmila said, raising his hand. In the air before them, the glowing images of 10 deities began to form. "First, you will need Ikenga," Orunmila began, "the Igbo god of strength, time, and achievement. Ikenga is a fierce battle god who helps warriors find victory. He is revered for his ability to turn effort into success. His presence will give you the strategic advantage you'll need in the coming conflicts. He protects the Igbo people, and his strength lies in guiding their aspirations." Ikenga's image shimmered, strong and resolute, a warrior with horns on his head, symbolizing achievement. "Next, you will need Ogun, the Yoruba god of iron, war, and craftsmanship," Orunmila continued. "Ogun is known for his strength in both battle and creation. He is the master of the forge, the one who can bend iron and shape weapons, making him invaluable. Ogun's power over metal and warfare has shaped many kingdoms, and he fights with unmatched ferocity." Ogun appeared before them, surrounded by flames, hammer in hand, his eyes glowing with the intensity of a blacksmith and warrior. "Then there's Tano, the Akan god of war, justice, and rivers," Orunmila said. "Tano is not only a god of war, but also of righteousness. His role in the battle will go beyond mere strength. He will help maintain the balance of justice as the conflict unfolds. He is a protector of the Akan people, and his connection to water makes him a powerful ally." Tano's figure appeared next, calm but resolute, holding a blade that glistened with the light of justice. "You will also need the unpredictability of Set, the Egyptian god of chaos, storms, and war. Set thrives in chaos and can turn any situation to his advantage. His experience with both destruction and survival in the face of disorder will be invaluable. Though feared by many gods, Set knows how to manipulate the forces of war like no other." Set's image flickered into existence, his eyes gleaming with danger, surrounded by swirling clouds of chaos. "Anansi, the Akan god of wisdom and trickery, will be another important ally," Orunmila continued. "Though not a warrior in the traditional sense, Anansi's cunning and ability to outsmart even the most powerful beings will serve you well. He is a master of strategy, using stories and deception to turn the tide of any battle. His knowledge of the human world and the gods makes him a key player." Anansi's image appeared next, a spider weaving a web, his gaze sharp and calculating. Then you must call on Kibuka, the Buganda god of war. Kibuka is a fierce warrior god who descends from the heavens to fight for his people. His prowess in battle is legendary, and his ability to lead armies into war will be crucial when the conflicts arise. His strength is unmatched among the Buganda people. Kibuka's form shimmered into view, spear in hand, his body adorned with the armor of a seasoned warrior. You will also need Mujaji, the Lobudu rain goddess, but more than just a bringer of rain. She holds immense power over the elements and can create storms that devastate enemies or save allies. Though not a typical war deity, her control over nature will provide an unpredictable advantage in battle. Mujaji's presence materialized next, her figure cloaked in mist and rain, her power evident in the way the air seemed to shift around her. And don't forget Iktomi, the Zulu trickster god of transformation and deception, Orunmila added. He is both a trickster and a shapeshifter. Iktomi can turn a situation on its head with a single act of mischief. His unpredictability will confuse your enemies, while his ability to manipulate situations will ensure that the odds are always in your favor. Iktomi appeared, a shadowy figure with ever-shifting forms, his mischievous smile hinting at his chaotic nature. Ala, the Igbo goddess of the earth, fertility and morality, is another essential ally, Orunmila said. Ala is the keeper of the underworld and the protector of the land. She governs justice and morality, making her an important force in ensuring that balance is kept, not just in battle, but in the aftermath of what is to come. Her power over life and death will be critical. Ala's form appeared, a regal figure, her presence heavy with the weight of justice and the earth itself. Orunmila paused before revealing the final name. His voice took on a deeper tone as he said, "Lastly, you will need Shango, the Yoruba god of thunder, fire, and war. Like you, Shango wields the power of thunder and lightning, but his pride and his connection to battle make him one of the most dangerous gods to approach." Amadioha's expression darkened. Why him? Shango wields a double-edged axe and is the protector of the Yoruba kingdom. His presence in battle is like no other, and his command over both fire and thunder makes him invaluable. But he is also proud, very proud. He does not like to lose. He's like two gods in one, a god of battle and a god of thunder, and his powers rival even yours. Orunmila looked directly into Amadioha's eyes. You must seek him first, but be careful. A fight will break out between you two, and the clash of your powers could tear apart the mortal world. I am not worried for either of you, but I am concerned about the destruction your powers will cause. Amadioha's eyes narrowed. And if I defeat him? He won't give up, Orunmila warned. Even if you overpower him, Shango will only become more competitive, willing to sacrifice his life if it means a chance to win. That is why I caution you. Do not use the new power you've unlocked. Fight him with your thunder alone, for if you show too much of your strength, it will only push him further. Amadioha nodded, absorbing the gravity of the task. You will find Shango in Oyo, living among humans, Orunmila added. He protects them from the shadows, but when you approach him, be careful. If you sense the fight is inevitable, teleport both of you to the abandoned planet at the edge of the universe. There, the clash of your powers won't destroy the world of humans. Amadioha remained silent for a moment before speaking. I will do as you say. Orunmila placed a hand on his shoulder. This will not be easy, but you are ready. Gather these gods and be prepared for what is to come. The journey back to the heart of the sun was swift, the golden rays parting to welcome Amadioha as he stepped once again into the radiant domain of Anyanwu, the sun god. The light here was warm, almost alive, and as Amadioha walked toward the Temple of Flames, Anyanwu greeted him with a broad smile. Ah, Amadioha, "You have returned," Anyanwu said, his voice full of warmth and power. "It seems Orunmila has sent you back with a purpose." Amadioha smiled. "He has. I've completed part of my training, and now I must recruit the gods for what's to come. But first, I've come to you." Anyanwu's smile widened. "You've grown stronger. I can sense it. The core of the sun has sharpened your powers." He stepped closer to Amadioha, his fiery aura flickering slightly. "But there is something you must do before you gather your allies, a task that will cement your name among the people of Igbo land." Amadioha looked curious. "What task?" Anyanwu's expression grew serious, his eyes burning with intensity. "There is a village in what is now known as Maduk. It is plagued by Muo Ojo, evil spirits that torment the people, spreading sickness, fear, and chaos. These spirits have taken root, and the people cry out for deliverance. No mortal has the strength to banish them, but you, Amadioha, you have the power to end their suffering." Amadioha straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me more about these spirits." Anyanwu's voice dropped to a low, rumbling tone. "The Muo Ojo are born of malice and darkness, feeding on fear. They were once bound to the underworld, but something has unleashed them, and now they roam freely, attacking villages, poisoning crops, and spreading illness. They have claimed the people of Maduk as their victims, and their numbers grow stronger by the day." Amadioha's jaw tightened. "I will destroy them." Anyanwu nodded, his fiery eyes glowing. "Good, but be cautious. The Muo Ojo are not like ordinary spirits. They are ancient and powerful, and they have the ability to bend the minds of mortals. Their influence is like a poison that seeps into the soul, making it difficult to distinguish friend from foe. They will try to turn you against yourself, to break your will." Amadioha's thunderous aura crackled around him as he clenched his fists. "They will fail." Anyanwu placed a hand on Amadioha's shoulder. "I have no doubt, but you must know that defeating these spirits will mark you forever among the Igbo people. Your name will be spoken as one of the strongest god in Igbo mythology, the one who brought peace and protection in a time of darkness." Amadioha's eyes blazed with determination. "I will rid them of these spirits, and then I will gather the allies Orunmila has named." Anyanwu smiled, his pride in Amadioha clear. "I have no doubt you will succeed. But before you go, know this. Once you confront the Muo Ojo, there will be no turning back. Their darkness will try to stain you, but your thunder must be the light that drives them away." Amadioha nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission ahead. "I will not falter." Anyanwu stepped back, the flames around him rising as if in acknowledgement of Amadioha's resolve. "Go now. Maduk awaits you." With a swift nod, Amadioha turned, his body surging with power as he left the Temple of the Sun. He felt the intensity of the task ahead, the need to prove his strength not just to himself, but to the people who would one day remember him as their protector. The land of Maduk was quiet when Amadioha arrived. The village lay shrouded in an unnatural stillness, the kind that speaks of fear lurking in every shadow. The sky above was dark, though it was midday, and the once fertile fields were wilting under the weight of a curse. Amadioha walked through the village, sensing the fear in the air, the heaviness that clung to the land like a sickness. He could hear the whispers of the Muo Ojo, their presence like a chilling wind that brushed against his skin. As he reached the center of the village, he found a group of elders waiting. Their eyes were filled with desperation and fear, but when they saw Amadioha, hope flickered in their gazes. "Great Amadioha," one of the elders spoke, bowing low. "We have heard of your power. The Muo Ojo torment us night and day, and our people suffer. Will you rid us of these evil spirits?" Amadioha nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I will take care of it. Now return to your homes." The elders bowed in gratitude, their hope reignited by his words. Amadioha turned his gaze toward the surrounding fields and forests, feeling the presence of the Muo Ojo growing stronger. "Where are they?" Amadioha asked. "They come with the night," the elder replied. "When darkness falls, they descend upon us, poisoning the land and tormenting our people." Amadioha looked toward the setting sun, the horizon already growing darker. "Then I will meet them when they arrive." The night came swiftly, bringing with it a cold wind and a sense of impending doom. As the moon rose, a strange mist began to creep over the village, and with it came the faint whispers, voices carried on the wind, speaking of fear, despair, and hopelessness. Amadioha stood tall in the center of the village, his thunderous energy crackling around him like a storm on the verge of breaking. He could feel the spirits drawing closer, their malevolent presence thick in the air. Suddenly, from the mist, they emerged, dark, twisted figures with glowing eyes, their forms shifting and writhing as they moved through the air. The Muo Ojo. They circled Amadioha, their voices hissing like snakes. "You dare to challenge us, God of Thunder! You are nothing! We will break you as we have broken the others!" Amadioha's eyes flashed with lightning, his voice a low rumble. "You will do no such thing." The Muo Ojo laughed, a dark and sinister sound, before launching themselves at him. Amadioha's thunder roared in response, and the ground shook beneath his feet as he unleashed his power. Bolts of lightning shot from his hands, striking the spirits with blinding force. But the Muo Ojo were relentless, their forms twisting and reforming even as the thunder struck them down. They whispered words of doubt, trying to seep into Amadioha's mind, trying to weaken his resolve. "You cannot destroy us, God of Thunder. We are eternal." But Amadioha stood firm, his mind clear. "You are nothing but shadows." With a final earth-shattering roar of thunder, Amadioha summoned all of his strength and struck the ground with a bolt of lightning so powerful that it tore through the village, sending a shockwave through the land. The Muo Ojo screamed as they were torn apart, their forms dissipating into the night, banished back to the underworld where they belonged. The village was silent once more, but this time the silence was one of peace. The darkness had lifted, and the air felt lighter, freer. The elders emerged from their homes, their eyes filled with awe and gratitude. "Amadioha, you have saved us." Amadioha simply nodded, his gaze distant. "The spirits will not return." As the villagers gathered around him, praising his name, Amadioha's mind drifted back to the task ahead. The battle with the Muo Ojo had been but a small test of his power. The true battle, the one Orunmila had warned him about, was yet to come. Far from the mortal realms, in a place untouched by time, the elder gods gathered in a sacred council. This was a place known only to the most ancient beings, a space that existed between realities, a plane where only gods could walk. The walls of the council chamber were carved from the very fabric of the universe itself, shimmering with the essence of countless worlds and realities. The air in the chamber was thick with tension as the elder gods assembled around a vast circular table. These were not just any gods, they were the oldest and most powerful beings in African mythology, deities whose names were whispered in reverence and fear by mortals. At the head of the table sat the elder god of the Yoruba, his eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. His power was palpable, radiating from him like the heat of 1,000 suns. Next to him, the elder god of the Igbo sat in silence, her gaze cold and calculating. Across from her, the elder god of the Akan, a being whose very presence seemed to hum with energy, watched the proceedings with quiet intensity. There were others too, gods whose names had long been forgotten by mortals, but whose influence still shaped the world in subtle ways. Their powers were vast, spanning the elements, the underworld, and the cosmos itself. The council had been called for one purpose, to discuss the return of Amadioha from exile. The elder god of the Yoruba spoke first, his voice booming through the chamber like a rolling storm. "Amadioha has returned," he said, his tone grave, "and his power has grown." There were murmurs of agreement from the others, though some gods shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The elder god of the Akan leaned forward, his voice sharp. "He was exiled for a reason. His arrogance, his recklessness, he is a danger to the balance we have maintained for eons." The elder god of the Igbo spoke next, her voice smooth but laced with caution. "He is one of our own. The Igbo people worship him, and his return will bring them great strength. But you are right, his power is unpredictable, and we cannot afford to ignore that." The elder god of the Yoruba nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Amadioha has